How you doing there? I have to forgive the appearance of this video, but I am on vacation. But I have done due diligence and then some, and made extremely extensive notes about this, the 50mm f1 Fujifilm lens. Been testing it now. I spent like 5.5 hours today. I actually spent 2 hours a day going over my notes on this lens. I actually have a lot to say about this lens, but first I have to state something that's actually important. And I take lens reviews very seriously, as I've said many, many times, but nobody wants me to repeat, the same useless nonsense and blather that other talking heads say about very fast lenses. And this, of course, is an f1 lens, saying useless nonsense such as this is a Boca monster lens and, other really insane nonsense. So I actually have some objective, empirical, demonstrable facts to state about the 50mm f1.0 lens that nobody else will state because they don't actually have the wherewithal or the experience with lenses to state that, or they just want to make a video with an affiliate link and hope you click on it and purchase it and then get a kickback. So I don't do any affiliate links, and I'm going to state what this lens is and what this lens is not, and specifically what this lens should and should not be used for. I'm first going to go over the negative attributes of this lens, not for any particular reasons, but this lens is by the way, also too, I have a lot of image samples, and I go over some of the demonstrable facts, even though they're boring images to a certain extent, posted on Facebook and Instagram. All of them are straight out of camera images. I also point out too some of the flaws and unique attributes of this lens. This lens does have some unique good attributes, and I'm going to go over the list of positives here in a second. But this lens is overcorrected for fringing, but nonetheless, it is overcorrected. That is a negative, especially when it comes to image fidelity and specifically black and white photography. There is inner element specular bloom. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. There's Boca Overlap. If you go to my Instagram or specifically to my Facebook page, some people call this a busy bokeh. It goes by several different names, but it's Boca Overlap. There is a radical aspherical element at the back end of the lens. This, of course, is a 12-element count lens. But this radical aspherical element at the back of the lens, if you see me looking off to the side, I'm actually looking at my extensive notes that I actually made on this lens to collect and gather the light from this enormous lens. And it is incredibly heavy and dense. Kind of humorously, but I've seen a few lenses like this. This is a low light vampire lens. Means it doesn't like the light, kind of like a vampire doesn't like to come out in the daylight. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Kind of humorous, but it's actually an important point to make. And also too, a negative and a positive attribute of this lens. This is one of just a few great lenses that's far less than ideal in good to high ambient illumination. Moderate and less than moderate image fidelity, or what you would call micro contrast, is not an ideal black and white lens by any stretch. I've done a lot of pixel peeping on a lot of images and spent a lot of time with this lens. Like, for example, the very inexpensive 60mm f2.4 lens from Fujifilm is a far, far better lens for black and white image rendering, specifically too, especially for portraiture, where intertonal gain and image fidelity for black and white portraiture is important. It's like, well, that's a 2.4 lens, and, this is really sexy. It's an f1.0 lens. Yes, but there are negative attributes to that. Not always, but there usually is, and this one has some unique negatives to it. I state this humorously, but I also mean it seriously. If this lens were a person, I'd actually call it a high-maintenance girlfriend who happened to also be a vampire. In other words, it doesn't like to go out in bright light, like a vampire. And I mean that seriously. I say that kind of humorously, get a chuckle out of it, but I've seen a few lenses like this, but only a few. And I've had my hands on and do own a lot of very fast lenses. Even at ISO 100, you're going to need, and this lens should come with, but doesn't, an ND filter, at least a 2-stop ND filter, but realistically a 3-stop ND filter. Even at ISO 100, if you plan on going out to moderate to, good outdoor ambient illumination, you're going to need an ND filter to stop down if you want to shoot wide open in that ambient illumination. bright light, and like I said, I have image samples on Instagram and specifically Facebook, full resolution images. In bright light, there is over-processed look and impressionistic out-of-focus light handling. All lenses are ultimately about light handling, and bright illumination. The specular and out-of-focus elements of the bokeh on this lens are not what, and of course this is semi-subjective, but very few people like that sort of, like I said, take a look at the image samples I posted on Instagram and Facebook. There are very few people that I know, very, very few, actually I know none, that actually like that type of bokeh rendering on the nature of how this lens handles that. And I'm nearly 100% certain that's the radical aspherical element at the back end of this lens. And by radical, I mean it is more of an extreme aspherical lens than a typical aspherical lens. At the back end of this lens, to actually wrangle that f1.0 light and the large front element and secondary and tertiary elements, there has to be a unique aspherical element to actually collect all of that and drop it to the 3 or 4 remaining elements at the back end of the lens for projecting out for the sensor coverage on the Fujifilm X mount. Poor performance in high ambient illumination, and that's even with an ND filter, which I happen to have a 77mm ND filter here with me. Unless it's stopped down to f5.6 or more, but you know, why did you spend $1,500 on an f1.0 lens if you're going to take it out and not use an ND filter with it? You know, do you really want to stop it down to f5.6? Didn't you pay $1,500 for an f1.0 lens? So this lens is going to need an ND filter if you want to shoot it outdoors wide open. And also, too, the way it washes out non-blown highlights or high reflectance images or elements of the composition, like white and red of a flag. I posted several examples of this. Is not good. The way that it actually handles non-clipped highlights or high reflectance and moderate to bright ambient illumination is not good. But I'm going to go over the positives here in a second, so I'm not completely writing this lens down. But I have to be objectively realistic and demonstrably make intelligent statements and not make, you know, nobody wants to see another, you know, foolish video of some, you know, fool saying insane drivel like, oh, this is a bokeh monster lens, you got to buy this is f1.0, I mean, look at that, look how sexy that. You've seen a lot of videos like that. That's unintelligent. It doesn't help somebody, and I don't believe in somebody spending a lot of money without knowing all the details up front, because knowledge is power, right? So poor performance and high ambient illumination, or even a moderate ambient illumination. This reminds me of my sugar glider pet, which is a nocturnal animal. It basically comes out at night. When you bring the animal out, it would scream at you because, you know, it's got huge eyeballs and it doesn't like... This lens does not handle, even with an ND filter, does not handle moderate to bright illumination well. And specifically the bokeh, it does not handle or render it well. That's why I've humorously called this a vampire lens, which means its best performance is less than moderate illumination, whether you shoot wide open or not. And I've seen a few lenses like that. This lens 100% does need an ND filter to be shot wide open in good ambient illumination, period. In fact, Fujifilm, for example, includes an ND filter in the 56mm f1.2 APD lens. This lens should come with a 3-stop ND filter. Are you listening, Fujifilm? The positives, let's actually get to what this lens is really good at. It's a low light winner. It is very sharp. It has very, very good, even wide open, extremely good, actually, resolution wide open. It's got very, very smooth, puffy cotton candy bokeh. It's actually got the smoothest, most puffy, you know, angelic cotton candy bokeh that I've seen. Top 3 lenses that I've ever seen for puffy, you know, like you had a stroke or something. Not that I would know. You know, where everything's fuzzy. It's extremely puffy. Some people like that, some people don't. I actually do like it, but that's in low light. This lens does not handle moderate to bright illumination well at all, even with an ND filter. For ambient, low light portraiture, this lens is incredible. For indoor club or an event lens or low light street photography, this lens would be an awesome choice. So if you're getting it for that, you're making the wise decision. This is much faster autofocus than the 56mm f1.4. It's a completely different type of autofocus drive. That should come as no surprise to anybody. High resolution, even wide open. There's only about a half a stop of fall off, even at f1 for as far as vignetting wide open, so it's almost unnoticeable. If I were going to go out in in low light, and I couldn't do flash photography, and/or I wanted to do dusky or dark photography, indoor or whatever, indoor club scene, this would be an excellent choice. This is the one I would take 10 times out of 10, okay? 10 times out of 10. For that, this is the lens that I would grab. And 0 times out of 10 would I take this lens in good to bright illumination for use even with an ND filter. A lot of people see very fast lenses like this and like, oh my God, that's some real sexy glass, but they don't understand the limitations. This lens does have specific limitations in it. If you think it's going to do one thing, like, wow, this is going to be really great, I could shoot it wide open and moderate to bright. No, you're making a mistake. This lens is not for that. Don't get me wrong, this lens is optical excellence. It absolutely is. I'm not riding into the ground at all, but I'm saying what it demonstrably is and is not. And I have to be honest about that. I'm not sidelining this lens, but I have to use my superior experience. You think that's egotistical? I don't really care. I do have superior experience, there we go, with lenses to say what this lens actually is, unlike every other talking head that says the same insane nonsense, like Boca Monster and, oh, sexy fast glass. That doesn't help people make an intelligent, informed choice about a lens. And ultimately, any lens and every lens is about how it handles the light. This is the most dense lens I've ever handled, and I don't mean heavy. Yes, it's very heavy. A 300mm f2.8 is a very heavy lens, and it's huge, but it's not that dense. This is easily the first or second most dense lens that I've ever had my hands on. I've had my hands on many, many thousands of lenses, so it is I've never handled. I think one lens might be denser than this that I've ever had my hands on, and that's saying a lot. This lens is incredibly dense. Who should buy it? Who is this lens for? Those who want a low-light ambient performer. Let me repeat that. Low-light ambient performer. Indoor club, somewhere you can't do flash photography. Ambient portraiture, low-light. Perfect. Low-light street photography. Dusky street photography. That is what this lens is best for. If you plan on taking it outdoors, you have moderate to good ambient illumination. This lens does not render well. The image fidelity is not high at all under any circumstance, low light or otherwise. Unless it's flash photography, you're going to use it for flash photography, then yes, you can actually overcome that fact on this lens, as you can with any lens for that matter. People that think this lens is the ultimate, because it's typical talking head and useless photography discussion boards, the ultimate bokeh monster lens, like, oh my God, look at that, it's an f1. So what? The ultimate bokeh monster lens, you need to know the actual facts of where this lens is good and where it's not. And while it's somewhat humorous, once again, to call this a vampire lens, it's also, quite, paints a picture mentally in people's heads what this, vampires don't like the light, they're going to shrink, they're no damn good in bright light, right? This lens is not a performer. It's not a performer even with an ND filter for moderate to bright illumination. It's just not. And the bokeh of the Boca Overlap on this lens also too has another issue. If you have bright speculars, I posted examples of this. 100% of over 50 images, I could not avoid inner element light bounce between the aspherical and the element before it, where you would actually see something image that is not actually part of the image. It's a shadow created from inner element light bounce between that aspherical element and the element before it. 100% out of over 50 images taken were unavoidable, were bright specular. Out of focus background was actually causing a mirage. Okay, I posted examples of this on Instagram, 2 examples, and there were over 50, well over 50. Any place, move, change position, bright speculars will cause that. Also, too, with an ND filter, still cause that. So for bright ambient, even with an ND filter, I give this lens a 4 out of 10. Let me repeat that. For bright, moderate, or bright ambient, even with an ND filter, I give this lens a 4 out of 10. for low light indoor ambient photography, low light portraiture, photojournalism, street photography. I give this lens a 9 out of 10. I know one other person that knows a lot about lenses, and that person is not on YouTube. They've called this a split personality lens, which is quite accurate. I've humorously called it a vampire lens. This lens is not good for moderate to high light. It's just not. Some people might instantaneously know that, oh, well, that makes sense. You know, it's a very fast lens. I'm not going to use it outdoors with moderate to bright illumination. It's a poor performer for that. The bokeh and the Boca Overlap, and the issue with the light bounce and the mirage creation between the aspherical and the element before it. No. So, less than moderate illumination, whether it be indoor or outdoor, this lens is awesome. But if you think, well, it's super fast, that means I could also take it outdoors, and yeah, I'm going to stop. Yeah, but do you really want to, you know, are you buying a lens for a decent ambient illumination, you know, that you're going to have to stop down to f5.6? It's like, well, I have this great lens as an f1. It's like, yeah, but you're using it outdoors in bright or moderate illumination, and you have to stop it way the heck down to f4 at the minimum, f4 or f5.6. With a 2-stop ND filter and bright illumination, you're going to have to stop this down at least to f5.6. Well, actually, that's not true. In bright illumination, on a 2-stop ND filter, you're going to have to stop this down to a minimum of f4. Even at ISO 200, which is base ISO in Fujifilm. But anyway, I said 4 out of 10 for bright or moderate ambient, and a 9 out of 10 for low light indoor or outdoor photography. But also too, the image fidelity on this is moderate and less, unless you're doing flash photography. So anyway, I hope you liked this review. It was accurate and you know, tried to be demonstrably objective as to what this lens is and is not, and who it should be for, and you know, make an informed decision before spending money. I love Fujifilm cameras and lenses, but you know, I don't do you know, talking, oh, this is the best lens ever, this is the Boca Monster lens, you should get this because it's really, you know, that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody at all. Whether you like me or hate me or somewhere in between, you know, talking head nonsense like that is unhelpful in an intelligent empirical review as far as what is this lens. Well, I thought it would be good for this, but this guy says it's not. I know nobody's paying him. I know he doesn't have any affiliate links, meaning me. And so that is helpful. That is the information that people do want. So I have seen maybe about 6 lenses like this that I've humorously, and I've been saying this for years, I call them vampire lenses. They're just no darn good in bright light. They're just not. And the 2 images that did look really good, which were actually the heavy chrome plating on the motorcycle engines, that was in very subdued. It was actually in the shadow of a building. Those, you know, it's a very high resolution lens. It is. Surprisingly, even shot wide open at f1.0, which I did shoot those wide open at f1.0, but that was in the shadow of a building, so that is where it did start to perform. So that tells you something. And every place where there was moderate to bright light, poor performance, undesirable. Let me not say poor performance, but undesirable. Boca Overlap, impressionistic, busy, people call it busy bokeh, whatever you want to call it. Not something that many people like. Let's state it that way. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and sorry for this weird background, but I'm on vacation. But I have taken this lens test seriously, and I've stated what it is and given my review for it, and you know, I stand by it because, you know, I will regret nothing about this review later unless someone says, I don't like your review. It's like, well, fine. You know, I got a lot of notes on this lens. A lot of notes on this lens. Thanks so much for watching, and wait for it. Fujifilm. Got my XT for you. Thank you. Goodbye.